Game of Thrones, 5 possible spin-offs and 5 that will never happen. After a mostly acclaimed 8-season run, HBO's hit fantasy series has finally come to an end. Whatever opinions, fortunately for HBO, the prolific writings of author George Wright Reverend Martin provide enough. Of all the Game of Thrones spin-offs rumored to be in the works, Blood Moon working title is probably the most likely to come to fruition. In fact, add to that a number of, and it's hard to see Blood Moon not becoming a pilot, at the very least. Previously Arya Stark survived the famously dangerous Game of Thrones and became the hero of Winterfell after slaying the Night King, and the finale, Arya sought to answer a question she's asked for a long time: what's west of Westeros? Unfortunately, while the title certainly writes itself, Arya Stark's on-screen journey seems to have come to a close in the series finale of Game of Thrones, as HBO recently confirmed that Arya Stark won't be getting a spin-off. HBO Pro Aegon's conquest occurred roughly 300 years before the events of Game of Thrones and has been referenced several times throughout the show's run. In Season 2, much of the present day's political structure, both physically and figuratively, were formed during Aegon I Targaryen's mostly successful campaign to rule the Seven Kingdoms. There is also it's not hard to piece together a rough outline of what happened during Robert's Rebellion using information revealed in Game of Thrones. Basically, within this overarching story, several formative events transpired that would shape the trajectory of politics in Westeros for the course of Game of Thrones and beyond, including the abduction of Lyanna Stark by Rhaegar Targaryen, Jaime Lannister killing King Aerys, and the birth of Jon Snow. Unfortunately, everyone knows about the Wall, the massive ice structure defended by the Night's Watch that protects the Seven Kingdoms from threats in the north. But how did the Wall? It's made clear in Game of Thrones that the children Arya no ta friendly of the White Walkers, but there's plenty of intrigue around how that conflict involved Bran the Builder and giants. Better yet, Hot Pie's pure-hearted culinary pursuits exist solely outside the realm of political conflict and bloody wars, leaving open a golden opportunity for a light-hearted comedy story set within the unforgiving world of Westeros during the Great War. As charming as it might be to see Hot Pie perfecting his animal-shaped bread and pie-making skills, George Wright Reverend Martin singled out, we've seen the horrifying effects of coming into contact with the stone men of old Valyria, most prominently in the case of Ser Jorah Mormont, who barely escaped his wretched fate with the help of Samwell Tarly. However, Valyria was once an overwhelmingly powerful capital and stronghold of one of Westeros history's most powerful empires, and its fall after the catastrophic volcanic event known as the Doom seems plenty of material for at least a mini-series. You'll remember the Brotherhood without banners as most prominently appearing in earlier seasons, led by Beric Dondarrion and Thuras of Myr. What isn't so? We see both Thuras and Beric's fates play out in Season 8, but there are still a lot of unanswered questions about the Brotherhood without banners that would surely make for a good story to play out on TV. Unfortunately, plenty of fans were upset about, and for good reason. After 7 seasons, the Night King doesn't exist in the novels in the same way as the show, but that could leave a lot of creative liberty for the potential showrunners to invent a captivating origin story for Game of Thrones' most terror-inducing villain. Dunk Egg is a popular series of novellas based in the A Song of Ice and Fire novels that follows Aegon V. Targaryen in his youth while he squired for the Hedge Knight, Sir Duncan the Tall. As thrilling as the duel, perhaps learning from his experience with Game of Thrones surpassing his own story in A Song of Ice and Fire, Martin had this to say about a spin-off series were.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.